You guys ready? You ready? You ready? What's that? Yeah, right. All right, so I guess we're ready. We're a little bit late. I apologize, but 5 o'clock start time. I wanted to make sure everybody had time to get over here and get off work and get through the traffic. You know how it is here in Somerville. So, but I appreciate everybody showing up. I recognize a lot of familiar faces out there. There are also some unfamiliar faces too, and I appreciate you taking the time out to come up here and see me talk. And how exciting that's going to be, I don't know. We'll find out. But I did wash my clothes, by the way. If you've looked at me while you've been here, you're probably saying, man, why didn't he put some clean clothes on? But these are actually the clothes that I wore for 94 days on the river. So they have been washed, they have been cleaned, but they're just stained. They got suntan oil, bug spray, mud, sweat, tears, all that kind of stuff all over them. So I just wanted to wear them kind of as a nostalgia thing, I guess. And they're comfortable and they're breathable. And I'm up here sweating already. So if you guys don't know me, I'll introduce myself. Most of you probably do, but who am I? This is me. This is a picture of me from Iraq when I was stationed out there in 2006. I'm a Charleston native. I'm from here originally. Moved out to Somerville mid 80s, I guess, 1986-ish, somewhere around there. It's my father, by the way, sitting here. So I'm asking him if that's correct. But so been out here since been out here in Somerville longer than I've been in Charleston. I'm a retired Air Force combat veteran. I did 22 plus years in the Air Force as a physical therapy and occupational therapy technician. So that was my background there. Former government contractor for the Marine Corps as well. I worked on a program called the Theater Medical Information Program, where we provided medical software, medical record software for deployed Marines while they're out there in deployed locations to help get their care back to the States so they could get the care that needed and have the record recorded out there in the deployed locations. Beer tender extraordinaire. A lot of you probably know me from around town. I used to work here, as a matter of fact, at Coastal Coffee for a little while. I've been a bartender over at Oak Grove Brewing Company. I opened up Lowe's Foods beer den up there in Oak Brook and was a beer tender up there as well. And then, of course, a partner and bartender at Homegrown Brew House for about 3 years before they sold the frothy beer over there. So been doing that. Also a previous endurance athlete. I don't do a lot of that stuff anymore, but used to do marathons, ultra marathons, triathlons. That'll come into play here in a second, but some Spartan races, got real big into that for a little while. I'm a full-time RVer now, so I bought a travel trailer, sold all my possessions last year in my house and everything, bought a travel trailer and travel full-time as much as I can. That'll come into play as well. I'm a paddler. I do a lot of kayaking. First time I'd ever been in a canoe was in this canoe back here. If you guys have seen it, this is the actual canoe that went 2,200 miles down the Mississippi River. All the equipment that you see in there is stuff that went down the river with me as well as this clothing, like I said. And I'm also a podcaster, so I'm recording this right now. So if any of you don't like being recorded, I'm sorry. It's too late. You're being recorded. This will go up on YouTube as a presentation, so if you want to share it with friends, family, and whoever, that would be great. Next slide. Oh, that's me. I'm sorry. I was gonna have you doing that initially, but there's too much stuff going on over there. So let's go back to the previous slide here. So I said these would come into play. The last four things there on that slide: endurance athlete, full-time RVer, paddler, podcaster. Kind of plays into how I got hooked up with Warrior Expeditions. Who are Warrior Expeditions? Well, they're a nonprofit. They provide long-distance outdoor expeditions, or what they call outdoor therapy, for combat veterans. How did I get hooked up with them? Well, a good friend of mine, an old boss of mine, a physical therapist that I worked with at Scott Air Force Base in Illinois, she actually lives on the Mississippi River out in Montana, or Minnesota, and she also spends some time in Iowa. So she contacted me one day last year and said, look, I've seen a lot of your pictures and your posts. You're doing a lot of kayaking. You're out on the water a lot. I know your background as far as an endurance athlete. I know that you have a podcast that you can promote and do things with, and you do a lot of social media posting and stuff. I think you would be, and you're retired, you're an RVer full time, so you have time on your hands. But I think you ought to look up this company, nonprofit Warrior Expeditions. I think it'd be right up your alley. It'd be a good fit for you. She said they provide all these different expeditions, and that she thought the paddling expedition would be a great fit for me to do because of the endurance aspect, having time on my hands, being a paddler and all those things. And I tell you what, being a paddler is an understatement. After doing this trip, I was not a paddler at all, and I still don't consider myself a paddler. But so they provide all these long distance expeditions. It's only for combat veterans. They do 10 annual expeditions, and I'll go over that in the next slide. They do 8 different hikes, 1 biking expedition, and 1 paddle. Actually started in 2012. A guy named Sean Gobin, he's the founder, and one of the only 3 people that actually worked for this organization, I believe, behind the scenes. But he had gone on 3 combat deployments himself. He was a former Marine. And when he came back, he decided to do the Appalachian Trail. While doing the Appalachian Trail, of course, he got a lot of therapeutic benefits out of it. And the long distance expedition, he had a lot of time to think and kind of regroup after his deployments and kind of reintegrate himself into society, get back into society, and kind of make those connections with people again. You kind of segregate yourself from society sometimes after you get on those expeditions or the deployments. So he decided to do that, and he got all these therapeutic benefits out of it. And he said, hey, maybe this is something that could benefit all these other people coming back from war. And PTSD and traumatic brain injuries and just trouble integrating back into society in general. So he put together this program. 2015, I think, is when the Warrior Paddle actually started. So it came along later. He just kept adding and adding more and more expeditions as it went along. About 400 people apply for these expeditions every year, and 40 people get selected. So they distribute 4 people out to each one of these expeditions. So 4 for the paddle, 4 for the bike, so on and so forth. All the expeditions are fully supported, so all the gear that you see over here and a lot of gear that I didn't even bring with me was all donated and given to us as part of the program. So we got to keep all that. As long as we complete the expedition, you get to keep all the gear. You get to keep everything, but they threatened us and said, if you don't get to the Gulf of Mexico, we're taking your canoe back. So everybody made sure that they got to the Gulf. So yeah, that's fully supported. They give you all the clothing. They give you the canoe, the equipment, your initial food stuffs that you bring with you. And then you also get a $300 a month stipend as well. So when we run out of our initial food that they gave us, about 7 days worth, then we stop in towns and have to replenish all this stuff for ourselves. So $300 doesn't go a long way, especially if you're stopping in these towns and you don't want to just go to Walmart and pick up some tuna and some different things. You want to go get you a burger and have some beers. That $300 doesn't last a long time, but they made sure that we had other sources of income before we got on the river. So we weren't just relying on $300 a month. What else was I going to say up there? Can you throw the website up there, Eric? No, on the. Is it up there? Oh, it's on the thing. Never mind. I had it up here. I forgot. You're not going to see it on there. So you can go to warriorexpeditions.org, and I did have the website up there, but get with me afterwards if you want to. But they're always looking for people to donate. They need money to operate these nonprofits. They are also looking for sponsors. So, we were sponsored by Old Town Next Canoes. We were sponsored by Carlisle Paddles, Granite Gear. I've got a slide with all this stuff on it. So if you're looking to support something like this, and maybe you've got a product that you think would be useful on an expedition, whether it be a hike or a paddle or something, go to the website. You can email them, let them know that you'd like to be a supporter in some way, shape, or form. That'll bring us to the next slide here. These are all the trails that they do, or all the expeditions that they do. I'm not going to read all that for you. I'll let you just kind of take a second to see what they do. And if at any time during this you have any questions, please don't hesitate to stop me and ask me a question. We can save them all to the end if you want, but if you don't want to try and remember something to the end, just pop up and let me know. So yeah, so this is what we did, the Mississippi River. The river itself is actually 2,341 miles-ish. It changes, the river changes just based on the flow and all the stuff that comes into it and all these major tributaries and rivers that flow into it. So the river actually moves and shifts, and all the ground and the sand and everything, the sediment, makes new pathways, and it extends it. It actually has extended I think, the Gulf by like 50 miles at this point over the last few hundred years, just all the sediment that comes down and goes to the Gulf. So it changes. We actually did roughly 2,200 miles, and I'll tell you why here in a second once we get to another slide. But so we did a little bit shorter than what that looks like there. But this is all the stuff. What I've heard from Sean is it's become kind of a cumbersome thing to manage and do all these trails. So I think they're going to be getting rid of a few of the smaller ones, some of the less popular ones, I guess, and they'll keep, you know, the river paddle. They'll keep the big trails, Appalachian Trail, Pacific Crest Trail, and some things like that. But they will be downsizing, from what I've heard, a little bit. So this is just some of the gear. I'm not going to go over all that as well. I mean, if you want to look at some of it and talk to me about the canoe, you can do that after the talk here. But this is just some of the stuff that some of the companies that provide support for this thing. Probably the biggest ones on there would be the Old Town Next, the canoes, of course, the tent and the sleeping bag, you know, invaluable. We got to have those. Some of the other things we could probably do without, but like I said, they gave us the initial clothing, the initial food to start with, various other items, you know, bug spray, suntan lotion, or SPF, all those things. The stipend we talked about. Here's a few facts about the Mississippi River. It's actually the second longest river in North America. The first is the Missouri. I think the Missouri has, I don't know, 100 miles or something on the Mississippi. It's not that much of a difference. And the Missouri actually flows into the Mississippi at one point. It goes from, if you're going from a source to sea, which is what we did, it goes from Lake Itasca, Minnesota, to the Gulf of Mexico. So we actually, me and the three other guys, I had two Army retired and a retired Marine that went with me. We didn't know each other at all, you know, before we started this thing. So about 3 days prior to this expedition, we met each other. We all flew into Minnesota. We had to get our own plane ticket. That's the only thing they didn't supply, which after they supplied all this other stuff, I don't know why they didn't provide the ticket to get us to the start of the thing. But and then when you got to the end, you had to figure out your own way home as well. So. Right. So yeah, so we all got into Minneapolis. You know, we stayed a couple of days there, enjoyed the Mall of America and some different things up there, and they picked us up there in Minneapolis and drove us up to the startup here, which was called the Lobos Cabins and Bar and Grill or something, I think it was. So there was 2 or 3 cabins up there, some tent sites where you could actually tent, but we actually had the cabins. So we got up there, stayed in the cabins. We did 3 days worth of training and then set up on the water. So the training included, you know, they sat down and just kind of gave us the history of the organization. Never actually put us in the water, so I don't even know how these people actually verified that we even knew how to swim, much less how to paddle a canoe down the river, but I guess they trusted it. But part of our recommendations on the after action report was, you know, at least put somebody in the water for a second, let them paddle around in a circle and make sure they know what they're doing. So we went over just all the gear. We set up the tents. We set up some of the equipment. We went through some of the bag items that they gave us. You know, a first aid kit. There's another bag full of toiletry type items and another bag full of all the initial food stuff. And I say food stuff. It was another thing we put on the after action report was it looked like they had emptied a vending machine and just gave us the contents of a vending machine to start this trip. Snickers bars, Pop-Tarts, Cliff bars. I mean, everything that you needed, just sugar, carbohydrates, calories is what they really felt like you needed to. And I told the guys, I said, look, I'm a fat adapted athlete. I kind of follow the keto, low carb style lifestyle. And they're like, well, that's not going to work for you on this trip. You need calories, you need carbohydrates, you need sugars. And I said, well, I think I'll try it my way and see if I can do it my way. And that's what I did. I think it was easier than the other guys that were trying to live off the sugars and constantly replenish their hunger and all these types of things with carbohydrates. I thought it worked a lot better at the slow pace and the slow heart rate and the just, you know, it wasn't high intensity working out. It was working out every day, but it wasn't high intensity. So I thought fat burning was a lot more efficient fuel than carbohydrate burning. So it seemed to work out for me. What else we got up here? Excuse me? I got a lot of fish. I mean, fish was kind of my mainstay. So you just go to the fish section there at Walmart. Walmart was our resupply. Give them a plug, I guess, Walmart, but they do have everything you need. we use a lot of their dehydrated meals. So if you go into their camping section, they have, I think, Mountain Backpackers brand or some kind of Backpackers brand dehydrated meals that you rehydrate with our jet boil that they gave us. We boil water and rehydrate. But I used a couple of those if they were kind of on the low carb end. The rest of the guys use those pretty much extensively for dinners and things. But I would go in and get the tuna and the salmon and the herring and the sardines and the oysters and just all the fatty fish is what I use mainly. Keto is kind of a big word now, so everybody has some sort of item out there. Slim Fast at Walmart has a keto line of Slim Fast stuff, so it's low carb, low sugar stuff as well. So a lot of that, peanut butter, low carb tortillas. I mean, anything you can put into a tortilla, we put into a tortilla. That was our main bread that we used on the river. It's pretty hardy. It had a Ziploc bag. It stayed fresh for a long time. So everything into a tortilla. I don't care what it was. And some of the combinations you would probably not be very happy about. But you eat what you got to eat when you're out there on the river. We didn't do, a lot of people ask us, do we fish? Do we take a fishing pole and catch our own fish? We could have, and some people do, but we were just focused on paddling. We didn't really, we were focused on energy conservation, let's put it that way. So anything that took extra energy to do, we didn't do. So fishing was extra energy, building a fire at night was extra energy. I mean, so every now and then you would do some of those things, but we didn't fish at all, not one time. Now, we did have some fish in our boat, but we didn't fish. There's some stuff out there called Asian carp that have kind of invaded this river, especially on the, I think the Illinois is where the Illinois River is where they first populated. And they come in. We went through sections of this river after we passed the Illinois where it confluences with the Mississippi. And some of you probably saw some videos. If I posted them out there, I posted a link in our article on the fish itself. But these guys were just, if you made enough noise in the water, they were just popping all over you. I mean, you'd be going down a section of the river and you'd have 20 or 30 Asian carp just jumping over your boat, in your boat, into your boat, under your boat, and it would scare the crap out of you. And I mean, we're talking fish, 2-3 feet in length. I mean, they're giant fish. One of my guys got hit in the ribs, had sore ribs for the next couple of days. They were dangerous fish, but they were fun. They were fun. They were a good time. What else here? Scientists estimate it takes a drop of water 90 days to go from the source to the sea. So a raindrop when it hits, I don't know how they estimate it, but it takes 90 days to go from the source all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. It took this tall drink of water here 87 days, so I beat the average, I guess. The other, well, I won't talk about the other paddlers, but I had a couple less days than everybody else, and I'll explain why down the road here. But the river itself actually dropped, and I'll show you on a map here in just a second, but it actually drops 1,475 feet from the source to the sea, so it's kind of coming downhill to the Gulf. At the beginning, before we even get to Minneapolis, and the first, I'll show you on another map, I think it's the next slide, but the first third of this whole trip is actually in Minneapolis. I mean, we go through 10 different states, but a third of the trip, you're in Minnesota, I'm sorry, not Minneapolis. And it's kind of disheartening, you're going 28 to 30 days and you haven't even left one state yet, and you got 9 other states to go by. So it's kind of defeating at the beginning. And you also start going north. You're not even going south when you first start off. You're going north, and you finally come up, I don't know, it's a good couple hundred miles before you even start making a turn east, and then you start coming south again. There's 13 dams that require portaging prior to Minneapolis. So before we even get to Minneapolis, we're not even out of the first state yet. We've got 13 different dams that we have to portage and go around. If you look at the canoe on your way out, you'll see some wheels back there. A lot of people think it's maybe a steering wheel or a fan of some sort that we hook up for power, but it's actually a portage wheel. So you put it underneath the canoe, and that allows you either to pull, drag, push your canoe and all your equipment around these 13 dams. Some of them might have been 200 yards. I think the biggest one that we had to portage was 1.5 miles. So you got to just, drag your canoe. You got your bucket that's probably 60 to 80 pounds, depending on what you got in it. Your backpack, you got your cooler, all your stuff, and you got to drag all this stuff up and down hills and through grass and down some steps here and there. So it wasn't just a nice smooth path that they had paved out for you. It took some work. Once you get done with the 13 dams that you got a portage around, then there's actually 27 what they call locking dams. So it'll be a dam setup, but there's actually a lock that locks the water on either side. You pull into the dam, or you pull up to the lock, I'm sorry, and you either call the lock, you can pull, there's a pull string on the lock itself. If you don't have a way to communicate, you can pull it, and that'll let them know somebody's there waiting to lock through. Or there's a phone number you can actually call on. The easiest way is on a VHF radio to call in and say, hey, we got 4 southbound canoes looking to lock through, lock 20, lock 2 or 3, whatever the lock is. They'll open the gates up and let you know there's a light system, a red light, a yellow light, a green light that lets you know, okay, it's okay to enter the lock. The green light will be flashing. You paddle in. They throw some lines down over the side, and I got some pictures later on. You'll see us in the locks, but you go in and just basically hold on to this line. They close the gate behind you. We're dropping, 1,400 feet all the way down to the Gulf. So we're actually dropping each lock we go through. They lower the level of water in that lock down to the level of the next pool that you're going into. So you might be at lock number 1, you're going into pool 2. So you just left pool number 1, you're now going into pool 2 through lock 1. The level drops, you get to your next lock, the level drops, and it's all the way down. You're just dropping into these different pools of water. And again, I'll show you something on that here in a second. But then you got one other lock that enters. So this is all the way down to St. Louis, 27 locks from Minneapolis to St. Louis. And then we had one additional lock way down. Once we got way down toward the end, we went into what they call the Edgefly River, or the Edgefly Swamp. So that's just a second direction that you can go to get out to the Gulf, and that's the direction that the Warrior Expeditions has all of us take. It's a little bit safer. You can go through Baton Rouge and New Orleans. There's a lot more traffic down there. You got bigger container ships that you have to run into. The barges just get more and more massive. You have now you got cruise ships you got to deal with. It's just a lot busier ports down there. So it's a lot safer to go through the swamp. So that's why they have us go through there versus going through and dealing with all this traffic. They actually recommend that you have a support boat if you want to try and tackle the Baton Rouge, New Orleans section, because it's just so dangerous. I actually got a couple friends of mine that are going through that right now. They left about a month after us, just getting ready to finish this coming Monday or Tuesday, I believe. So they decided not to go the swamp section. The Edgefly Basin is the largest swampland in North America. So it is actually a swamp. It looks like a river when we first started it, but the further and further we got into that swamp, you actually said, okay, now we realize this is a swamp. Down the entire river, there's species of mammal, 360 fish, 145 amphibians, 326 birds. Probably the most, I probably saw all those, really. But the most memorable, I guess, was we saw over 300 bald eagles along the trip. And then I think once we got into the swamp, we counted about 73 alligators. So those are probably the 2 most memorable animals. We didn't see any bear for some reason. We thought we'd see some up in Minnesota, but we did not. But tons of birds. Really the only amphibians I can think of, besides maybe a frog or something here and there, a lizard, but it was the alligators. Ton of fish, all kind of different variety of fish. Those are all the states that you go through, so the 10 different states. The narrowest part of the river is when we first started. This canoe over here is 29 feet wide. So at the beginning of the river, you're looking at 20 to 30 feet wide, if that, because this year we had record low water levels this year. I don't know when it's ever been this low, but it was record low. So we started at the headwaters. We literally, you can walk across the Mississippi River at the headwaters. There's a rock path where you can actually say you walked across the Mississippi River. And we put in the water, and probably not 40 feet down the river, we had to get out and drag our boats across a section. So we hadn't even been in the water a few hundred feet before we had to get out and do our first walk. It probably took us 3 hours to go about the first 3 miles. And after that, our team, because Warrior Expedition stayed with us for the first 4 to 5 days, just to make sure we knew what we were doing, how to navigate. All the equipment worked, and they didn't need to replace anything right off the bat. We went those 3 miles in 3 hours, and the team finally decided they were going to pull us out because the water was so low the vegetation had grown so much, the rice fields and everything else that were there, we could literally not figure out where we were going. I mean, there was no way to navigate and get through this section. We would have killed ourselves. So they made it a command decision to pull us back out after we had communicated back with them quite a few times. And look, we have no idea where we're going. We can't navigate. There's no water. I mean, we can't see anything. So we're literally, in mud up to our knees, trying to pull our canoes and drag through these weeds and get out. They made a decision to pick us up, and they got all our gear packed back up in the vans and drove us about 40 miles downriver to Lake Bemidji, which is our first lake that you come to on the river, and put us back in at Lake Bemidji. So we skipped about the first 40 miles because you just couldn't do it. I mean, it was basically a hike at that point. You're not even in the river. So I think they said that was the first time they've done that since 2015, since they've been doing this. Last year they had to cancel because of COVID, but the first time they've had to take somebody out of the river because there was just no river. The widest is at Lake Winnipegashish, which is also in Minnesota. It's about 11 miles wide at that point, and that is considered still the river. Water skiing was actually invented there. It was kind of a cool point that I found. It's narrowest at the headwaters at mere inches. I should have said shallowest is what I should have said there. And it's deepest in New Orleans down at 200 feet. We never saw that, and you wouldn't see that anyway, but that's how deep it gets in the river. And actually the river's been swum twice, and once in 66 days, which is less than we paddled it in a canoe. I don't know how that works, but all right. That's the Mississippi. So this is just a small map. As you can see, like I said, up here at the top, you can see how it kind of starts to go north, and then it comes around and starts going south again. But so these are all the states that you go through. Actually, in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa, you hit a point where you're actually in 3 states at one point. And there was one other place too. I think it was Tennessee, Arkansas, and Missouri, I believe, that you're actually in 3 different states at one point. Most of the time down the river, obviously, you're splitting the river between 2 different states. So you might have Iowa on one side and you got Wisconsin on the other, Illinois on one side, Iowa on the other. All the way down, depending on what side of the river you decide to stop on, you'll sleep in one state or the other on the side of the river. This is where it comes down here. This is where that split is. So this side here, going to the west, is the Atchafalaya Swamp. It shaves off about 150 miles off of the trip. So that's why we only did about 2,200 miles versus 2,341-ish or whatever. Then, of course, if you go the other way through Baton Rouge and New Orleans, you still hit the Gulf. It's just a longer distance and more traffic. So we actually came out of the swamp here. We hit the Gulf of Mexico, and we did about 2 miles in the Gulf around this point here to a place called Burns Point Park. And that's where we got out and finished our trip. So, and then, I don't know how well it shows up here, I guess, but this is the lock and dam. So this is all the lock and dams that you go through from Minneapolis all the way down to St. Louis, 27 of them. And you can see how, the elevation change once those pools, the lock drops down to that next pool. It just steps its way all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. And you can see the level changes there. Like the very first lock that we went through, I think had a 45-foot drop. So you're sitting inside that lock in this chamber. If anybody ever remembers Star Wars, the trash compactor that you go into, and they're squeezed into this trash compactor, that's what it feels like when you're in these locks. And some of the sounds you hear are what it sounded like in Star Wars as well. Kind of creepy. But so yeah, 45-foot drop in that very first lock, which was disheartening because I wasn't looking forward to the locks anyway. I mean, just getting up to it was kind of daunting, and then to get in there and have that thing drop, and you're just in this sarcophagus, of a tomb, and you're looking back at the gate behind you that they closed, and you're seeing a little bit of water trickle through this lock, and you're hoping, or through this gate, you're hoping that gate just doesn't break loose, and all this water just, millions of gallons of water flood down against you, and just slam you into the front gate. But, so yeah, the water drops, and the gate will open. They'll sound a horn to let you know it's okay to pull out. Most times we were in the locks all by ourselves. But a few times you'd be in there with a sailboat or a recreational boat. One time we were in there with an actual tug. You were never in there with barges because the barges are just too big. You can't get in there with the barge itself. And then the rest of this thing is just going to be just going through a few of the pictures that I put together and then we'll just open it up for some questions if that's okay with you guys. So if you guys followed along on my Facebook, my Instagram, I mean, I took just picture after picture of the sky. I mean, this is all we saw. We saw skies just, you could not believe the skies that you saw. Sunsets, sunrises, the cloud cover. A few days, and I couldn't find the pictures that I had taken, but a few days we had mist where you couldn't even see this far in front of you. I mean, a foot or two in front of you. There was a couple of days where we just pulled off to the side of the river, and so we're going to wait for the mist to burn off because it was just so thick. You could not see in front of your face, and you don't want to be out there. You know, the barges and everybody else, they got radar and all these things. They can go through the mist, but we didn't have that luxury, so we didn't want to get stuck in some traffic. Some more skies. The one thing we love to see, I mean, you know, we like the solitude of the river. Obviously, you like the nature and not seeing any industry and just having nothing but birds and all this stuff flying around. But whenever you did see a bridge, you knew that civilization was coming and that you were going to have a place to stop, maybe to get a drink or maybe get some lunch or maybe have a breakfast early in the morning if you didn't want to eat, you know, the stuff that was in your bag or in your cooler. So when we saw a bridge off in the distance, and trust me, they were in the distance because you would think, oh, there's the bridge. You know, we'll be there in 10 minutes. And, you know, an hour later, you finally get to the bridge. It was a lot farther away than it looked. But the bridges, you were very happy to see them. And every major town, you know, had a bridge. This one I thought reminded me of who remembers the old Cooper River bridges, you know, here in town. That reminded me of that. I can't remember what town now. I want to say that was outside of Vicksburg, I think, Mississippi. Camp, you know, camp was what it was. I mean, we slept anywhere from, in the state of Minnesota, they do a very good job, the Department of Natural Resources. They do a great job of setting up all these campsites along the river. So they're set up specifically for canoeists. I mean, they've got a big canoe sign that says, welcome, you know, canoers. So they had a very good system set up in Minnesota. We pretty much, you know, we had big maps in the front of the canoe. We also used Google Maps and all these different things on your phone, but we had these big paper maps from the Department of Natural Resources that we navigated with initially, and they had all these campsites listed on there. Once we got through there, we had to kind of pick and choose where we stayed. It might be a boat ramp, it might be a state park, it might be an actual, you know, campsite, RV site or whatever that has some tent sites available. It might be, like you see here, just on the side of a river on a beachfront, on a sandbar. Yeah, this one was actually at a boat ramp here. That was our very last stay on the river, as a matter of fact, was at this boat ramp. Our very last stay in a tent. We actually stayed one more place after that, but it was not in a tent. But yeah, you'd be just, you know, beachfront right here, just watching the traffic go by, and the boats would be right there in front of you. Sometimes they'd honk at you, sometimes they wouldn't. If it was nighttime, they got these giant spotlights that they're shining across the river to look at focal points on the river, and you might get a giant spotlight in your tent in the middle of the night as they're trying to navigate the river themselves. And yeah, I mean, this is it. So tents, I mean, this is pretty much what we did 90% of the time. Now, Warrior Expeditions does provide community support along the river as well. So they provided us a list of names in all the major cities of a supporter that has gotten on the website, warriorexpeditions.org, and said, hey, I want to be a supporter. I want to support these guys as they go down the river or the trail or whatever it is. So they call these guys River Angels. I think, Cody, on yours, they call them Trail Angels, I guess, or something, right? Cody back here did the Appalachian Trail, by the way. Not with Warrior Expeditions, but just on his own. So we might have supporters set up, a VFW, an American Legion. They try to use, you know, military-style supporters because it is a military type of organization. But it was also some, and they would normally put us up in a hotel, you know, there locally. Sometimes we'd stay an additional night in a hotel. We paid for that out of our pocket, but they provide the bill, put up the bill for the first night. And then they would provide us a meal and maybe take us to the VFW, and they would take us into town to Walmart and let us resupply our supplies and things like that. But then other supporters, you know, we stayed in somebody's RV one time. We stayed on somebody's back porch in our sleeping bags. One place we stayed at a kayak rental store and stayed in their backyard and just pitched a tent in their backyard. So it just depended. The type of support we got might be different along the way, but usually it was some sort of air-conditioned, building. One of the people, they sent their kids to a neighbor's house and let us sleep in their kids' bedrooms, so people just along the river just were amazing, supporting. But the tents is what we mainly stayed in. And, it's just a single person tent. I mean, I'm 6'1". If I stretched out all the way, I mean, my feet were touching the end of the tent, my head was touching the other side of the tent. So they were pretty small accommodations, but it's all you needed. We had a little sleeping pad, you brought your own pillow. I had my iPad with me, so I was able to watch some TV shows and whatever. But so life was okay, semi-normal, I guess. Lunches, this is what I was talking about. Everything went good on a tortilla. This was probably one of my big indulgences as far as a carbohydrate, I guess, if you could say. I decided I was going to try and stay at 100 grams of carbohydrates or less. So my only real indulgence as far as the carbohydrate was honey. And I figured it was a little lower on the glycemic index and a little better carbohydrate than some others. So one of my big main lunch meals when we would stop for lunch would be peanut butter and honey on a low-carb tortilla. These are something alive. Something alive? No. The top picture up there, we had a lady actually come, I think she said an hour and a half drive to come and meet us at this one town she knew we were going to be stopping at and brought us brownies. Adventure meals. So Mountain House Adventure meals, that's the dehydrated meals we normally got from Walmart. That's our jet boil. So you just boil, a cup and a half, 2 cups of water, whatever it called for. You dump it in there, you stir it up, it rehydrates, and you got a meal. I kept some spices just to kind of keep things spiced up a little bit. What's that? Yeah, the jet boil. It's actually got a burner there at the bottom, or gas at the bottom that you screw on. It's got a burner, so it boils the water. Takes about 60 seconds or something to boil the water. Some more stuff. Camp. The one on the right, yeah. Oh, that was a home cooked meal. But the one, I can't remember what campsite this was, but we were, all across the river. And I think it's in the next slide maybe. But we had what we called river magic. So you had river angels, angels along the river that would provide support and take you in and give you a place to sleep or whatever. But you also had river magic, and that would be just not expecting something. And it chokes me up thinking about it because, people were so good on the river. They were, to me, the biggest takeaway of this whole trip is the people that were along the river. And it still chokes me up. I don't know why, but so this particular site, we're at this campsite, and the guy brings over his crock pot and says, hey, we just made all this corned beef and hash or whatever it was, some peppers, some kind of beef, and said, do you guys want it? And we're like, yeah, hell yeah, we want it. So we took it, and, this is my tortilla. This was one of my paddling partners. He called this keto cheese, and I said, that's not keto cheese, I promise you, but that's what he named it. He said, I'm going to put some keto cheese on it. So I went ahead and borrowed some of his cheese and put some on it. So I made kind of like a Philly cheesesteak tortilla wrap, I guess is what I made that day. So, but yeah, people would just bring us stuff, whether it be beer, bottled water, crock pots full of food. What's that?
They brought you water, right?
Yeah.
Water in a can.
Yeah. This was the very last place we stayed. This was a place called Edgefly Basin. So this was actually on the Edgefly River. And we just happened to come across this place. I was searching some River Angel stuff. There's a page out there on Facebook for Mississippi River Angels. And I just happened to come across this guy's name, Danny Majors. He runs this place. It's not an official business, but he named it Edgefly Basin. And I contacted him. I said, look, we're short on water. We're short on electricity for all our stuff. We use a bunch of power banks and stuff to charge all our laptops and our phones and stuff so we can navigate. You had to have power. We only had paper maps for the first, for the headwaters through Minnesota, and then the upper and lower Mississippi. So once we got down to some of these other spots, we had to have something to navigate with, which was Google Maps is what we used. Found this guy, I contacted him, said, hey, can we come and stay the night. We just need to get some water. We need just a nice place to sleep for a night and recharge all our stuff. And he said, yeah, absolutely, come on by. And that's what he does. I mean, pretty much he's an ordained minister for his real job, but his secondary job is just being a river angel on this swamp. So we pulled in, told him we were going to be there around 4:30. I don't think we showed up until about 6:30 because the current had dropped, so we didn't have as much flow going on. I think we had some major headwinds, a little bit more traffic. I think we got stuck in, well, no, there wasn't any locks at that point. So I think it was just the flow of the river, the headwinds, some different things that delayed us by a couple hours. So he kept checking in with us, you know, do you have a new ETA? So we'd give him a new one and that one would fall through. And by the time we finally got there and pulled up off the river and got up to his spot, to his house, he had this giant pot of jambalaya cooking right there. And I told him, he said, what kind of beer do you want? He said, is there anything you need? And I said, well, we'd like some beer. He said, what kind of beer do you like? And I said, well, anything, you know, one of our guys likes like a lager, a Pilsner type thing. I said, me and the other guy, there was three of us at that point. I said, we kind of like the IPAs. We get there and McUltra is what he decided to get us. So I don't know. And I even told him, I said, we like to support local. So if you got something local, so I don't know where McUltra came in.
Grocery store.
Yeah, exactly. But speaking of local, when we were up in around the St. Louis area, it seemed like the entire state of Missouri, everybody was drinking Busch Light. And I mean, it's an Anheuser-Busch town. I mean, that's where Anheuser-Busch is in St. Louis. But it just was kind of funny to us that nobody was drinking the Budweiser, Bud Light. It was all Busch Light for some reason. I guess it was cheaper. But so yeah, that was our last official home-cooked meal on the river right there. And he actually cooked us breakfast and some bacon and stuff the next morning. And he made us a big to-go baggie of jambalaya and some bread, and I think he had some brownies. He gave us a big to-go bag of everything to take with us. So. Wildlife. I didn't put a lot of wildlife stuff on here, but tons of birds. The birds were always showing off for us and prancing around, and just tons of them. Probably the biggest one that made the biggest impression on me was the black-tipped pelican. I'd actually got one of the feathers. I didn't pluck it off of the guy, but I found it, you know, just on the ground and picked up a bunch of feathers, and I got some of them that went all the way down the river with me here. So this is not an Asian carp, but this is just a little minnow that jumped into my boat one day at the end. So he was cool. Of course, we saw tons of deer. This is one of the very first photos I took on the right here. That was just a random donkey sitting along the river. So I made this post, you know, what jackass would paddle the entire Mississippi River. But we saw cows, you know, all kind of weird kind of farm animals and stuff, really. But these guys just watched us. This was my little friend. I don't know if any guys followed along, but this is Hitch. I did a little video series about Hitch. He rode with me for 30 miles down the river. So I did a couple small little videos of me and Hitch, you know, traveling down the Mississippi River, like a Huck Finn type thing, I guess. But I don't know what happened to him. But actually, so he went 30 miles down the river with me, and we got to this one sandbar campsite. That actually was the campsite where my tent blew over on me. The wind gusted. We were kind of on an exposed sandbar. We kind of were up, and it was exposed to the wind. It wasn't a tree line or anything. And the winds picked up to about 35-mile-an-hour gusts that night. And actually, you know, I had three stakes on each side of the tent and one on each end. All three of my stakes came off of my left side of my tent, and actually the wind rolled me over while I was inside the tent. But that was the campsite that Hitch ended up going to with us. I didn't take him in. I should have taken him in my tent with me. I don't know what happened to him, but I had this little post that I got on my tent here. I had my hat attached to it, and he was just kind of hanging out up underneath my hat. So that night, you know, I went and picked it up. He was still sitting there. I said, "All right, Hitch, we'll see you in the morning." Came out, and there was no Hitch in the morning. So I don't know what happened to him, but
Maybe he hitched up with something else.
yeah, he hitched somewhere else. So yeah, the barges. Everybody wants to know about the barges. I tried to get as you know, it's kind of like the Grand Canyon or anything else, right? The pictures just don't do them justice, but the barges were tremendous. And everything on the way down to St. Louis, I believe, all through the 27 locks and dams, I think the max amount of barges that you would have behind a push boat or in front of a push boat would be 15, I believe, was the max. So it was usually 3 across and 5 deep. At 3 across and 5 deep, they couldn't even make it through the locks all in one piece. They had to split, do what they called a split, split the barges up into 2 different pieces to bring them through the lock. So that would take, you know, if you got there after a barge had gotten to the lock before you got there, you'd be waiting 2.5 hours for a barge to get through there before you could go through. So you just had to pull off and camp on the side of the river until you get through. We did have one instance where the tugboat captain that worked the lock right there, you know, they have a tugboat there just in case they need to push these barges in different directions. It just kind of stays with each lock. It's assigned to a lock. And this guy saw that we were waiting for a couple hours and said, hey, do you guys want something to eat? And had some fresh victuals that he had made up there in the barge and just, you know, handed it down to us, gave us some fresh bottled water. So more river magic. Just more pictures of barges. This is the biggest one that I saw on the river. The 2 people that I got that are finishing up behind me next week, I've actually seen one bigger than this, but you know, that was down in the busy area, Baton Rouge area. But this one here, this particular one is 42, so it's 6 by 7. Massive. I mean, it's the size of a football field. It's huge. This one was around, I want to say this, Fort Riley, I think was the name of the fort, but I just thought it was a cool barge. It was painted, you know, Army colors and had all this Army stuff on there. So this is just a picture of some lock and dams. So this is actually what the dams will look like, you know, just coming all the way across, damming up the water. They've got little hydraulic gates on each one of these sections of the dam. You know, each particular one is a different opening for the water to flow through. So depending on how much water they want to let loose, they'll open up those gates and water will start flowing through. So at the time we were going through, there wasn't a lot of flow going on because it was a drought, low water levels, there's no rain going on, so they're not letting out a lot of water. The other disadvantage we had early on was no flow. You know, if they're not letting water out to come down, then there's no water that's going to be flowing. It's kind of stagnated. So we did not have very good flow to start with. Once we got through St. Louis and got through that last lock and dam, it probably picked up a good 4 miles an hour, you know, the flow. And they were letting some more water through too at that point. So this is actually inside of a lock. Birds like to hang out. There's a lot of dead fish usually hanging around over there, so they like to kind of hang out. This is actually inside of a lock. So you can see what I'm talking about, the wall. I don't remember if that's where we started in that particular lock or if that's where we ended up. But, you know, I mean, you can see there's a good 15, 20 feet at least of wall that you see that the water has dropped down that far. The guys that work the lock, you know, will come over and throw the rope down to you, and you just hold on to the rope and hang out. What you see here in the water, this was actually blue-green algae. So they had a huge blue-green algae problem going on in the upper river. And some of the lakes and stuff, I think I heard actually shut down because it's supposed to be a health hazard, you know, breathing hazard, asthma, those type things. So, but a ton of blue-green algae. There was some points of the river where we didn't even want to get in the water. It was so thick. I didn't really care too much about it, but some of the other guys had a big problem with the blue-green algae. This is actually the very last lock that we went through. So this lock actually takes you into the swamp. So that's the last one that you have to go through. And it was probably, definitely, if it would have been the first lock, it would have been my scariest lock. But this one probably, I want to say it dropped 50 to 55 feet in this lock. And the noises that it made as the water was dropping was just unreal. I mean, it was like a haunted lock is what it was. We should have gone through on Halloween, but you know, so there's a few pictures. You know, we tried to stop in towns along the way. You know, those bridges I talked about. You saw a bridge, you're like, okay, it's a place to buy some beer. So we would buy beer, try and get some local stuff, and we'd take it out on the river with us. At least have a beverage. We didn't really use the cooler as a cooler, so we didn't usually have ice. So it was always, unless we drank it immediately when we bought it, it was normally a warm beer. But it was better than no beer at all. Some more of them. This one I thought was cool. I actually got it at the Mark Twain Brewing Company in Hannibal, Missouri, the home of Mark Twain. And then what we decided finally was, you know, we're drinking all this warm beer. we can go buy this box of wine, and it doesn't have to be chilled. You know, red wine, you can drink warm, so we'd be better off just buying some wine, right? What am I drinking out of? Right here? No, yeah. No, these little cups actually attach to the bottom of the jet boil. So it's like a measuring cup for the jet boil, so you know how much water you're pouring in, how much water you're boiling. Then you can just use it as a drinking cup as well. So. And I think that's about it. So if we wrap all this up, no, here's more support. Okay, so like I said, American Legions, VFWs were big supporters for us. Like how you can see that big barge in the back there. But this is actually a beach we pulled out. Harry and Eric, they were always in front. They were always our navigators. This is Harry, this is Eric, this is Willie. They were always our navigators and our scouts. So they were always ahead of Willie and I, and they would go out in front the night prior, and of course the morning we would say, okay, we're going to this campsite, 30 miles downriver, 25, 35 miles, whatever. So we all had a landing point. We all knew where we were headed to. They got to this campsite first. It's just a big beach sandbar. There was probably, you can't see it back here, but there was probably 20 boats, pulled up, and everybody just swimming, camping, partying, barbecuing, having a good time. So Willie and I come pulling up, and we're like, man, we hope that is not where we're going right there. It looks so busy, because you paddle all day. You paddle 8-9 hours a day. You really just want to get to camp and just relax. You don't want to have be talking to a whole bunch of people and having to do a whole bunch of stuff. You want to set your tent up. You want to get in it and go to sleep. There was a party going on here, so we ended up partying with these guys. These guys were the closest boat to us, probably right there behind my shoulder. They gave us all the food they had cooked. They brought all their food over to us, all their coolers of beer, and just hung out and partied with us the rest of the day. So more river magic, I guess. These are our very first supporters, the Broman Shankles. That was up in Minnesota. Very first stop we made. I can't remember what town, the middle one. I want to say that's Carruthersville. 2 different places we had the local sheriff's department come and pick us up at the boat ramp, but not because we did anything wrong, but they just came, supported us, picked us up. So that's the local sheriff's department of Carruthersville, I think. This is Danny Majors. This is the guy on the Edgefly Swamp, Edgefly Dreaming. He's the one that cooked us to jambalaya and set us on our way that next morning. This was in Lansing. What's Lansing? Iowa? Missouri? I can't remember. There's a bunch of Lansing. This is Cape Girardeau. This is actually, or no, this is Carruthersville. This is actually the mayor of Carruthersville. This is in Natchez, Mississippi. This is the girl that brought us brownies. This is in St. Louis, another supporter in St. Louis. We stayed a couple days there. And I meant to look this up last night because I forgot this guy's name, but this was in Alton, Missouri, I think. I think this is the home of the world's tallest man. I can't remember his name, so that's us standing to a picture of, he's dead now, but that's us standing to a picture of him, so imagine that's how tall this guy was. This was some post here. I'm wearing a different outfit. We tried to wear the same outfit every time we went out. We had 2 sets of gear to showcase warrior expeditions while we were in town. This particular day, I didn't get the memo on what we were supposed to be wearing, so I had on a different outfit. That could have been it too. And I think these are the last 2 pictures. We actually pulled into a town unexpectedly. We didn't plan on going there, but Willie actually had hurt his back one day, so he's got this little corset on or whatever, back brace on. But we pulled into this town, up to this marina, and Harry got there first, pulled up to the marina. This is the owner of this oyster bar. This is one of the bartenders here. Pulled up and said, hey, we're with War Expeditions. We're paddling the Mississippi River. Can we stay at your stay at your marina and can we get something to eat? Got to let us stay for free. Paid for all our meals. Great guy. These two guys here, we were actually camped at a site, and I think these guys were following our journey on the Mississippi Paddlers page and the River Angels page. Found out where we had landed this day on this sandbar, this beach. Had a grill set up on it already, a standard grill. These guys jumped in their boats, came out with some brats and some chicken and some beer, cooked us a meal.
You know, the left not afford pants.
Yeah. Yeah. You know how it is. I wear short shorts,
I
but
do know how it is.
yeah. So yeah, these guys just pulled up and just cooked us a meal right there on the beach. Didn't even know them. And that's really about it. I mean, to wrap it all up, you know, we started July 14th. We went to October 15th is when we officially finished. 2,200 miles-ish around there. We had 27 River Angels that supported us along the way. And acts of kindness, that's what AOK means. So river magic, you know, about 50 different magic out there. 94 total days is what it took us to go. 87 days paddling. Eric and Harry there, which you see in the picture there at the top on either side of me, they actually took them 89 days. I took 2 extra days of leisure along the river than they did, so I took 2 more days off. So I had to do extra paddling to catch up with them, so I spent less days on the water because of that. 2 less days than they did. But I enjoyed myself in a couple of towns and stayed overnight. So total over the trip, probably over a million paddle strokes. We did lose 1 boat. It's still missing in action. We have no idea where it is. We were on a sandbar, another exposed sandbar, but it wasn't a raised sandbar, so we didn't come up onto it. It was a real flat sandbar that we got up onto. And normally, you know, we pulled our boats up off the river, what you would think would be far enough off the river to be safe. Normally, there's a water line. You know, you would see a water line from the waves that crash up, you know, when the barges and traffic comes by. They create a water line, so we would pull it up at least to that water line, but normally 2 or 3, 4 feet past that, which is what we did on this sandbar. We didn't realize at the time that the water was going to be raising 1.7 feet that night. So because we were on such a low sandbar, that 1.7 feet of rise in the river equated to about a 13 to 14 feet takeover of the beach. So it washed up, you know, water came right up underneath our canoes, washed 2 of them out. There was only 3 of us on the sandbar at this point out of the 4 of us, but washed 2 of our canoes out, mine being one of them. We ended up calling the Coast Guard and said, hey, we're on a sandbar, we're paddling the Mississippi River. This was 2 o'clock in the morning, mind you, when we found this out. We've got 2 canoes going down the river somewhere. We have no idea where they are and all our equipment, but we just want to let you guys know that there's no people in these canoes, you know, that it's just canoes going down the river. So don't send out a search party for any people, but we are stuck on the sandbar and we kind of need to get off of it. We've only got 1 canoe, there's 3 of us. So they said, well, we can't really help you. That's out of our jurisdiction. You'll have to call the local police department, sheriff's department. So we called, I can't even remember where exactly we were at this point, but I know we were just north of Memphis, Tennessee. So we're pretty far, you know, 1,600 miles into this trip, I guess. But so we called the local sheriff's department and they said, well, here's a better idea. Call 911 because 911 will have a better way to track your exact location and pinpoint exactly where you guys are so we can get to you. So we called 911 and they said, well, we're going to wait till daylight. And they said, yeah, well, we'll wait till daylight as well because we might be able to spot our canoes somewhere. You know, we were kind of in what they call a wing dam area. So it's kind of a little cove that's cut out with these wing dams that kind of feed the river, the flow and the current in one direction. So we got up at daybreak and tried to find both of our canoes. Couldn't find them. So the cops said, okay, we'll be out there. They dropped the boat in 16 miles downriver and boated up to us. When they got up to the sandbar where we were, they could see us and they bullhorned out to us and said, we can see you, but our boats will only allow us to go into water that's at least 5 feet deep. So they couldn't get all the way up to the beach. They said, is there any way you guys can get out to the boat? And we said, no, we only got 1 canoe and we've got all this gear. The canoe isn't really weighted weight-wise for two of us to get in there and ferry each other out. So we really can't do it, and we don't know what the current's going to be like, what the undertow might be like in the river. So we're not swimming out there. So they went up and down the river for about 15 to 20 minutes trying to find a boat captain, a tugboat captain of some sort, that could drop their longboat off of the back of their push boat, their tug, that could get into some shallower water. So they finally found a tugboat, got two of their crew members, deputized and whatever. They came out with their longboat and were able to pull right up to the shore and grab us. So they helped us get in the boat, loaded all our gear into it. Eric paddled his canoe out to the sheriff's boat, and the tugboat crew ferried us out. We got in and started going downstream to the boat landing that they had put in at 16 miles downriver. And about 4 miles down the river on the left, they see my boat, my canoe sitting there just kind of lapping up against the shore. So it had gone down just 3 or 4 miles. We went the rest of the 16 miles, didn't ever see Harry's canoe. So we had to make a hard decision at that point. Are we going to continue on without Harry? Is Harry going to get a new boat? So we made a decision to stick together as a team. I don't know why it chokes me up, but we stuck together as a team, and he bought a new boat there in Memphis. They got us to Memphis, and we stayed overnight, kind of made these decisions as a team. And Harry went ahead and got a new boat, new paddle, new flotation device, all this new gear. Luckily, he had all the stuff that's inside the canoe. We had pulled it up to camp, so he had all that stuff up there. But got a new boat, and he finished the journey with us. So I lost 27 pounds on the trip. I think Harry lost 33 pounds. Eric actually gained 3 pounds. I don't know how Eric gained 3 pounds, but yeah, he was the only one thing. And that's really about it. And I just kind of put this thing down here. The more simple we make our life, the happier we become, I guess. So that's what I learned on the river. That's it. I went a little long. I don't want to keep you guys here any longer than normal. It's supposed to be 5 to 6. I know we started about 15 minutes late, but does anybody have any questions, comments?
Based on my following you on Facebook, at least you got lucky and rarely had a bad weather day.
Yeah.
Looks like you pretty much had pretty decent.
Yeah, we got extremely lucky.
The entire time.
Yeah, I mean, you hear all the horror stories, not horror stories, but you hear the stories of the weather, and you're going to have rain, and you're going to have thunderstorms, and you're going to have all these mosquitoes and bugs and blah, blah, blah. And we really got blessed and got lucky with maybe a handful of really bad weather days.
Like 2 or 3 coasts that had bad weather.
Yeah, yeah. And even if we did have bad rain, it normally wasn't a thunderstorm, so we still paddled in the rain. We were wet anyways. I mean, probably the worst part of the entire trip was you were never dry. I mean, maybe in a hotel overnight you got dry, but for the most part you were wet the entire trip, whether it be your feet, your pants, whatever, from sweat, from the river. A couple times from a couple people falling in the water, but we won't talk about that. I did not fall in the water. I think Eric went in to drink twice. I think Harry went in once. The very first day, as a matter of fact, Harry went in the water. Nobody ever capsized their canoe. We did take on some water here and there with barge traffic and waves and some different things, but nobody ever capsized or sank the canoe or got swamped out, as they would call it. And then same thing with bugs, because of the drought, because of the low water levels, there wasn't a whole lot of bug either. So we got very lucky as far as mosquitoes until we hit the swamp.
Support people followed you the whole route or just part of it?
No. The War Expeditions people, yeah, there was 2 of them. So one of them was Sean, the actual founder of the organization, and then the other one was Michelle. She's the one that puts together all the equipment and ships it out and gets it all to you and orders and everything. And they traveled with us for the first 4 days.
That's what I thought you said.
Yeah, so we put in on a Wednesday, and they stayed with us until that Saturday to make sure, like I said, that everything worked. We knew what we were doing and fixed any problems, gave us some tips and tricks on navigation and how to find a campsite and all this stuff. So, but yeah, after that.
Did they keep track of you as you went along to make sure you were still with us?
They did. They kept track of us, yeah. They were, on Google Maps, you have the option to share your location. So we actually shared our location with those guys. So they knew exactly where we were at any given time on the river. And we knew where each other were. So if we got split up, I would know that Harry's 10 miles ahead of me at this campsite or whatever. You could see his little face, his little pin, and we dropped pins to let everybody know where we were at any given time. So, but yeah, they followed us down and they gave us support along the way. Three of us out of the four broke our initial paddles that we had. So they had to resupply some paddles. We had to get some new clothing items a couple times. One of the guys, his sleeping mat got a hole in it, so it wouldn't hold air in a sleeping mat in his tent. So they would provide support, and they'd figure out where we're going to be in 3 or 4 days, and they'd send something in the mail to meet us when we got to that next location. So yeah, really good support.
I have a couple questions for you, Tim. When you saw the bridges, you go into town. What did you do with your canoe? Did you lock it up, or did you just leave it in the lane?
We were really concerned about that initially, and the War Expedition guys told us, don't worry about it. The river's a different animal. People aren't, the type of people that are out there on the river and around the river, they're usually not going to steal your stuff or mess with your stuff. So they told us just leave it, take your valuables with you, obviously, but just kind of push it and put it out of sight somewhere. And that's pretty much what we did. We had cable locks on the front of each of our canoes, so we could actually, cable them all together. So if you got all four of them tethered together, it's a little harder to steal 4 59-pound canoes at one time than if they were individual. So we would lock them up like that. Every now and then we tie them up to a tree, or we try and hide them in a bush, some brush somewhere or whatever. But for the most part, you just pulled them up and took your valuables out, and you were good to go, really. But on occasion, we call ahead to a marina and say, hey, we're pulling up. We're going to be camping around your marina. Can we use one of your slips and tie up to your marina? And so we'd have some places where there was security around, or a state park or something, that they would say, we'll have a patrol coming around watching your stuff and whatever. Some people put them on a trailer and took it to their house with us, But most times they were just sitting on the side of the river. Yeah.
And then with the water, did you guys drink the water? Did you filter the water, or do you have supplied water?
I filtered the water about halfway through. I ended up buying a water filter. But they gave us a 2.5-gallon water bladder that, collapsible water bladder that we would fill up. So as long as you had a location where you could fill up, every 2-3 days, you had plenty of water. We ended up buying a couple extra of those bladders. We'd get to a Dick's Sporting Goods or REI or something. We bought some extra water, and then I ended up buying a water filter. I said, man, instead of carrying all this extra weight, because, a pound of water is 8 pounds. So if you're carrying 5 extra gallons of water, what's that? 40 extra pounds in your boat, So I started carrying a filter, so I didn't have to carry all the weight. The other guys weren't too sure about filtering the Mississippi River water and didn't want to partake in it. They did when they needed to, when they really wanted some water, they drank it, but I wasn't too worried about it.
So since it was a 3-month trip, did you, especially I was thinking the latter days of the trip, did you have those days when you were like, I'm tired of seeing this damn water?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, probably in the first 3 days, I was tired of seeing the water, to be honest. I mean, I probably almost quit this river 30 times at least. In the first 3 days, I had a problem with my boat. We finally figured it out before the support left us. I had a problem. I could not keep my boat from going to the left. I mean, I would literally go in circles, in left-hand circles. And the first 3 days, I threw my paddle up numerous times and said, F this, I'm out, I'm done, I'm not doing this anymore. I would paddle 20 times on my left side compared to one time, 30-to-1 stroke on left to the right, just trying to correct my boat. And finally, they found out there was a problem with my seat, where the seat was leaning to the right-hand side. So all my weight was kind of to the right-hand side of my seat, which makes the boat kind of spin to the left. So once we fixed the seat and got me all squared away and evenly distributed some of the weight out in the boat and figured out some better placement of some things, my trajectory changed and I was able to paddle. But I was done the first 3 days.
Yeah, it goes back to give me a 30-minute course in the river before we actually start.
What's that? Oh, yeah, that would be
Make sure everything's set, right?
Yeah, that would exactly be the reason why. Yeah, we should get on the water before we get on the water. But yeah.
So, is there like a program where you're going to do the trip in reverse order?
No. I mean, in a boat, maybe a ferry boat, river boat, cruise or something, maybe. But yeah. No. But there was a couple of times we had two different towns, Vicksburg being one of them, on the Yazoo River. We had to actually go upriver to get to the landing spot that they wanted us to land at. So we had to go against the current, against the grain on a couple of different rivers to get to the landing point of our supporters. So.
Sounds like no fun.
Oh, it was no fun. The Vicksburg was one of our least favorite days. After we paddled probably 33 miles that day, and then to have to go 2 miles up this river against the current was not fun at the end of that day. But. Anything else? What's that? Who asked that? Would I do it again? You know, I get asked that question quite often, and right now my answer would be no. But, you know, if somebody, I don't know, if somebody really twists my arm to maybe do it again, I think I could definitely do it better than I did the first time. So yeah, I probably would. You know, somebody like Richard or somebody, you know, a great paddler back here, or Cody, or somebody say, hey, let's go do the river. I might say, yeah.
Maybe a different adventure.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be way different. And I would probably take more time the next time I did it. Even though 94 days, you know, was a pretty good amount of time, but I'd probably stretch it out to 100, 110 days maybe, just to be less wear and tear on the body and just enjoy it. You know, enjoy maybe more of the towns along the way.
Well, you might get a hankering to go back and get that 40 miles.
Yeah, we've talked about that, Eric and I, because Eric was really disappointed. He's pretty hardcore. He was a ranger in the Army, and he was, I mean, I could see him just gritting his teeth when they pulled us out of the water after 3 miles and said, we're going to drop you 40 miles downriver. He was like, no, damn it, I'm doing source to sea. I want to do every single mile on this thing. And eventually, you know, 20 days into it, when somebody would say, you know, we'll put your canoes in the back of the truck and we'll take you around this one dam so you don't have to portage, Eric was like, yes, let's do that. Yeah, let's get rid of some of these miles. So he changed his tune pretty quickly, but yeah.
That's a lot of paddling in 3 months.
Oh, it's a lot. And I still have some pains from it. So
Well, it
it's,
could have been 30 million to 1 if they didn't get that seat.
yeah. I wouldn't have gone that far. Anything else? All right, I think we'll wrap it up. Let these guys get out of here. We got, if anybody is interested, we got Paul Stone Project playing next door at Oak Road Brewing Company. He's going to be doing some blues for us tonight. He actually wrote a song for me on the river. He'll be performing that tonight sometime, I hope. And, you know, we'll give these guys some love over here, drink a couple beers. You can ask me more questions, whatever. I appreciate you guys coming out.
Good job. Thank you for your service. I never did tell you that.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Thank you, buddy. Yeah, appreciate you coming.